Hey guys, Zack here, and welcome back to another action figure review, and today we'll be taking a look at the Godzilla store exclusive Bandai Movie Monster Series Godzilla 1994. Now, this version of Godzilla comes from the 1994 film Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, which, it's alright. It's definitely not a great movie, but it's definitely far from the worst too. It's a little below the middle as far as like my ranking of the franchise, but overall, it's not a bad movie. It's fine. It exists. If I will say anything about the movie that I like, I think the main theme, Echoes of Love, is genuinely a great song, which if you haven't listened to yet, then honestly, I'd say the movie is worth watching just for the main theme alone. Or you could just look it up too on YouTube. That's an option too, but I digress. But Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla as a whole, it's alright. It's watchable. It's not a great movie, but it's not the worst either. So, it's watchable. So, yeah, I don't really have a lot else to say, so let's just get right into this. Like usual, before we take a look at the figure itself, I want to take a quick look at the tag here. So for the front, we have a nice render of Godzilla from Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. And I forget which building exactly, I forget where, but this render of Godzilla here is actually used for, I believe, Toho Studios, I believe? One of the buildings, there's like a giant mural of this render here, and I think that's really cool. Again, it might not be Toho Studios. I'll put up a picture and I'll put up where it actually is, like, in editing, but yeah, so I do think that's really cool that they use this render. For the bottom here, we have Godzilla 1994, both in Japanese and in English. Godzilla 2024. On the back here, we have Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, Movie Monster Series, both in English and in Japanese. Godzilla Store Exclusive, Bandai Namco, 3. Bandai, Godzilla, some legal information here. And on the inside, we have just more legal information here. A little bit of a bio here. I don't know what this says, but I do know that this does give a little bit of info as far as this design of Godzilla goes. But yeah, more legal information, a barcode, and the Godzilla logo here, or emblem, whatever you want to call that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the tag. Now going back to the figure itself, to start, we'll take a look at the paint. And the painting on this figure is actually different compared to other Movie Monster Series figures, and I'll talk about that in a second. But first and foremost, the entirety of this figure is going to be casted in this traditional charcoal black coloration, which is, traditional for Godzilla, and I think it looks nice. His toenails and fingernails here are going to be painted this whitish yellowish color, which I think looks nice. Going to the head here, we can see that his eyes are going to be yellow with orange pupils, and that looks about right. I think it looks good. The teeth here are going to be, the same as the nails, like this yellowish whitish color, which Godzilla needs to brush his teeth more, but I digress. Anyway, the inside of the mouth, it's a little tough to tell, but it's like a dark, like, glossy purple, which I feel like it was red in the movie, but I'm not going to make a big deal about that. Like, it looks good in person. I don't really care. It's just something to point out. I will say there's a bit of excess glue here, which I get, Movie Monster Series figures. They're like mass-produced, but again, this is just, little things that irk me. But going to the dorsal plates here, they are painted very nicely. They are painted white with black in the center here. And the insides are going to be painted the same way. With some releases, they don't really paint the insides, which is a little annoying, but they did that here, and the dorsal plates here look great. Now, this is where the figure gets interesting, because usually with Godzilla figures, they either paint, like, the entire back of the tail up to here, or all the way to the end here. But Bandai actually went ahead, and they painted each individual osteoderm scale, whatever you want to call these. They painted each individual one all the way to the end of the tail. And I think that looks great. This is the gold standard of Movie Monster Series figures. Like, granted, they look a little sloppy in certain spots, but, like, still, like, this is big. We never see this on a Movie Monster Series figure. Usually it's like, they paint like the entire, top of the tail to like here. And if we're lucky, we get it all the way to the end of the tail. But no, here, like, they painted like each individual like bump here. And again, like, some spots look a little sloppy, but like, this is really cool. I like this. If Bandai went forward and just painted their Godzillas more like this, that would be great. I would be so happy. But I digress. Anyway, that's pretty much it for the painting on this figure. And overall, I think the painting looks really nice, Again, like, these bits here, like, some of them look a little sloppy, but again, like, the fact that they actually tried this is really cool. Well, that, and I'm not a big fan of the glue stain here, but overall, the painting on this figure is actually very nice. So the painting here, I'd say, definitely gets a pass. Now, we'll take a look at the articulation. And the articulation on this figure, I mean, come on, you've seen it before. The arms can move forwards that much, and they can move backwards about that much. And the legs here, they can kick forward about that much before it starts to get tight, and backwards that much before it starts to get tight. Theoretically, it is possible to have the legs do a full 360, but I wouldn't recommend doing that. I don't like to do that because I fear that it'll scrape against, like, the two parts here, the leg and the torso will scrape against each other and it'll damage the figure. I don't want that. So, if you get this figure and you want to try it out, then be my guest, but just know I wouldn't recommend you do that. So, yeah. And that's pretty much it for the articulation. Again, like, it's a Bandai vinyl. Like, there's not really a whole lot to this. So, yeah. Well, usually not a whole lot to Bandai vinyls, but I digress. Anyway, it's still fine. I'd say it gets a pass. Now, we'll take a look at the sculpt. And the sculpting on this figure, I think, looks pretty much perfect. I mean, that's not really a surprise. Bandai usually does a bang-up job as far as the sculpting goes on their figures, the keyword being usually. But this figure is no exception. I think the proportions look great. Nothing looks too big or too small or too out of place here or anything like that. And I think this figure does a great job, representing Godzilla from Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. And one thing that I just want to quickly say about the Heisei era as a whole, for the movies from Godzilla vs. Biollante to Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, I really like how Godzilla has, like, a mostly consistent look, but they make, like, slight differences to the suit, like, per film. Like, Godzilla looks slightly different from Godzilla vs. Biollante and Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. Like, they look very similar, but there's some slight differences between those two suits that, make them feel different, and I like that. And also going from Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah to Godzilla vs. Mothra. The differences are a lot more noticeable, but, like, again, it mostly looks the same. It mostly, like, feels like, like, expanding off of, like, the previous design. And I like that, It's not too drastic, it sticks to the formula, but, like, it adds little things, like, it changes up a few things, and it makes, each suit feel different. And I like that. But going back to the sculpting on the figure, it looks great. So, overall, the sculpting on this figure, I'd say, definitely gets a pass. Now, we'll take a look at the detailing. And the detailing on this figure, I think, looks good. So let's take a closer look. So starting off with the head here, we can see all of, like, the bumps and all of, like, the scaling on the head here. I think looks very nice. Everything here is detailed pretty nicely and overall just nicely defined. The scaling on the neck here is detailed very nicely. I think this is, I think it looks really nice. And this, the traditional, like, scaling that we see in Godzilla, usually, like, goes down all the way through the body here, but, like, all the creases and folds, like, in the skin here really gives off that guy in a suit feel. And I like that, and we see that in the arms here, like, the folds here are detailed very nicely. And again, especially in the chest here, like, the scaling looks great, but again, we have, like, a lot of, like, creases and everything that, again, gives off that guy in a suit feel. And I really like that. Going to the legs here, again, just a lot of really nice scaling here, The musculature, like, within the suit looks good, but again, like, we still have those, like, creases and whatnot to still give off that guy in a suit feel, and I like that a lot. The dorsal plates have a nice bit of detailing on them as well, like all of the ridges here I think are detailed nicely. Going to the tail here, again, we just see a lot more scaling and more creases, which again, overall, looks very good. All the way to the end there. The underside here, there's not going to be a whole lot of detailing, but we do get some, and it doesn't look bad. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the detailing on Godzilla here. So, overall, I think the detailing looks good. So the detailing here, I'd say gets a pass. Now, we'll do some size comparisons. To start, here we have the Bandai Movie Monster Series Mogira, 1994. And these two look good next to each other. I don't have the Movie Monster Series Space Godzilla. I'm not the biggest fan of Space Godzilla as a monster. So here we have the Bandai Movie Monster Series Godzilla 1991. And this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, as far as, like, Godzilla's design in the Heisei era. They look the same, but they feel different, because you can see, like, the slight differences in, like, Godzilla's head here and, like, the build of Godzilla here overall compared to everything else here. You can see the differences, and I like that. You know, they look similar, but they're different. It's cool. I like that. I also don't have the Movie Monster Series Little Godzilla that came out. So here we have a little Mecha Godzilla, Super Mecha Godzilla to be precise. And I am still, like, it's been over a year at this point, but I'm still kind of annoyed with this size. Like, Mecha Godzilla should be taller, you know? Not, you know, taller than, you know, the regular Godzillas, but, like, at least the same height. This is just sad. I'm sorry, but I digress. Anyway, of course, here we have some hand sanitizer, and here we have Dr. Billy Grant. So at the end of the day, should you get this figure? I'd say yes. I think the painting on this figure looks great. I think the sculpting, the detailing, everything about this figure looks great. It feels great. You know, there's not a lot of articulation, but, like, you know, it's a Bandai vinyl that's kind of to be expected. But overall, I do think this is a really nice figure, and I definitely recommend that you pick this one up. As far as price tags go, you have two options. This being a Godzilla Store exclusive, you could either pre-order this guy on the American Godzilla Store, and the price tag there is about $32, which a bit much, but, you know, it is like, you don't have to pay too much for shipping. But you could also import this guy from the Japanese Godzilla Store and pay... Well, MSRP for this guy on the Japanese Godzilla Store is a little over $25, which is not that bad. But shipping is going to cost you, like, an extra, like, $20 to $30. So overall, you're probably going to be paying, like, $50 to $60 for this guy, including shipping. So if you want the cheaper option, then I'd say pre-order this guy from the American Godzilla Store. But if you want this figure sooner, then I'd say just import him and just pay the extra $20 to $30. With that said, I just want to give a fair warning. If you do decide to get this guy through the Japanese Godzilla Store, please do not use ECMS Express, because they take their very sweet time as far as, like, shipping their figures out. Now, usually, you know, Bai has, like, you know, FedEx is an option, and they're great. You know, they get the package to you within, like, days after it's released in Japan, which is awesome. But unfortunately, FedEx is no longer an option through Bai. So I decided to go with the cheapest option, that being ECMS Express. But this company took its sweet time. Now, this figure came out on December 13th in Japan. And this figure didn't arrive in my warehouse until December 16th, which, okay, 3 days later, that's not that bad. So I choose my shipping method, ECMS Express, and they ship it out. And other people got this figure within days. I myself had to wait almost a month. Like, I just got this figure on January 6th, right? And people got it within days, where I had to wait almost an entire month. So if you want this guy in a hurry, then don't use ECMS Express. You know, if you don't mind the wait, then by all means go for it, because it is the cheapest option. But if you want this figure sooner rather than later, either use another shipping method, or at this point, you might as well just pre-order this guy from the American Godzilla store. But I digress. Anyway, that is it for today. Next week is going to be a doozy of a video because I have that big box set to review, that Movie Monster Series box set that consists of Showa King Ghidorah, Showa Kamakura, Showa Anguirus, Gabara, and Showa Mechagodzilla. That's going to be a doozy. And pretty much all of you who voted seem to want that in one big video. So, yeah, that's going to be a big video for me to work on. But I digress. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But anyway, that is it for today. Have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next video. Peace. Zack out.